Hello, everyone. Welcome to MLS Moves. Please make sure you like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Got a lot to talk about tonight. Going to start this weekly series talking about the MLS standings, talk about just like where the race is for the standings, the top teams, talk about some of the races as far as like the Golden Boot, the assist leader, uh, coach of the year. Just talk a little bit about what's going on, especially with there being for a lot of teams like less than 10 games left. So should be an interesting remainder of the season. I'm gonna have a couple guests come on tonight to talk about the race, talk a little bit about their teams, see what their thoughts are about the season so far or the remainder of the season, and then talk about maybe some teams who are on the fence or close to making the playoffs but might miss the playoffs, hovering around that 8 to 9 spot. Should be pretty interesting to see down the stretch which teams will be able to prevail and end up making the MLS Cup playoffs. And there'll probably be some bad teams just because of how many teams make the playoffs. There's 18 out of 29 teams make the playoffs. Well, there's a play-in game, so technically there's only 16, but there's actually 18 teams have the potential to make the playoffs. So we're going to talk a little bit about that race, talk about the Supporters Shield, talk about who I think is going to win it, talk about who's in contention for it. Got a couple comments. Tommy says, hello. How's it going, Tommy? Brandon Berman says, I need to win a jersey. Hey, I think we all need to win a jersey, honestly. Elon Don says, let's go. My friend of the show, Mo Football, says, my guy. Appreciate it, Mo. Mister, big fan of the show. He says, hey, Will, how's it going, Mister? Thanks for tuning in. My biggest fan from England, I think, right? You said you're across the pond. Manuel Villalobos, a actual member of the channel, says, let's go. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. So far, we'll just get right into it. Inter Miami is currently in the driver's seat for the Supporter Shield. They have 56 points through 26 matches. And the next closest team, as far as points, would be the LA Galaxy. They have 52, and they've played one more game than Inter Miami. Now, LAFC probably has the second best odds of passing or catching Inter Miami for the Supporter Shield, just because they have 2 games in hand. They've played 2 less games than LAFC. I'm sorry, than Inter Miami. They are, what are they, 9 points behind? So LAFC probably of all teams has the best opportunity of catching Inter Miami. And excuse me. Also, too, it's going to be interesting to see when Messi comes back from his injury. That's obviously going to have a lot of. I think that's going to impact the race as well. Even though Inter Miami has done well without him, I think it's going to be interesting to see when he comes back. It's going to be interesting to see how he impacts the team. So that's something to follow. So we got a guest, Favi Renkel, good friend of the show, good friend in real life. I'm going to go ahead and bring him in. He's on a time crunch. We're going to get his thoughts on this. So let me bring him in. Bobby, what's up, man?
What's up, guys? How's it going?
Yeah, we're just talking about the Supporter Shield race as it stands right now, how Inter Miami's in the driver's seat. They have 56 points, 26 games played. The only team that I would say has a realistic chance of catching them would be LAFC, just because they have those 2 games in hand and they're 9 points behind. Now, it's obviously going to be an uphill battle. It's not going to be easy to
do, right?
No, Columbus is actually 13 points behind. Well, they got 3 games in hand, but they're 13 points behind. So it's going to be a little tricky to make that deficit, because even if they win out, they're still going to be, they're still going to be a little bit, behind. Oh, look, we got another guest in here. We got Eric of the Voices of Black and Gold. We'll go ahead and bring him in as well. Let me just make sure I get this the right way. Hold on one sec. Oh, that's not right.
What's up, guys?
What's up, Eric?
I'm trying to get this.
Hey, how's it going, Fabian?
I wore this hat for you.
Oh, look at that. Look at that. I wore this jersey for you.
Shit, I can't see it. I'll see it in a second.
Ole porco.
Okay.
I guess we're going to have to do it like this for now. Oh, there we go. Here we go. Good. I wanted to be able to show everybody the standings as well.
I got this, though.
Well, that's a nice one. That's a nice one.
Yeah, the Pizza Boys one. That's a cool one.
Oh, the Pisa Boys the best. Although, if we start getting to LAFC, like the chat's
I'll
gonna
cut you
take
off.
their
Hey,
knives out, like, fuck this LAFC dude. Oh, sorry.
no, you're good. You're good. So let me read a couple of these comments. This guy said Ivan Flores says new sub, great content. Will appreciate it, Ivan. Thank you for subscribing. Manuel says Inter schedule has 2 tough games on the road. They play at the Crew and at New York City FC. So this is what we were talking about, Eric. I don't know if you were watching before, but we were essentially just talking about the Supporter Shield race. We were talking about Inter Miami being in the driver's seat. They got 56 points, 26 games they played. The only realistic team, coincidentally, is your LAFC, who probably has a chance of actually catching them just because they have 2 games in hand and they have 47 points. So even if they do win their next 2 games and they're both at that 26 games played mark, they're still going to be 3 points behind Inter Miami. But, with each team having 8 games left after that, they could easily, one of them could slip up and then they're right there neck and neck for the Supporter Shield. So I would say realistically, that's the only team that has a chance of catching them. And even that's going to be kind of difficult.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's Miami's race to lose. The only way Miami at this point doesn't get it is if they beat themselves and they slip up on some games that they shouldn't slip up, which we see it all the time in sports. But, getting down that stretch of the playoff race, if there's one thing you hate as a sports fan, it's not controlling your own destiny as a team. And Miami's the only team that really controls their destiny at this point anymore, I think, in the Shields race.
Favi, so do you realistically think that LAFC had a tough game on Sunday night, really tough game, and stuff like that can either make or break a team because that kind of lays in the back of your mind. A lot of people are talking about their finals losses, and I think they hear this. So do you think that do you think LAFC is going to prevail and really make this a race, or do you think that they're going to kind of slip up and with everything going on?
I like how you asked me the LAFC question when you have Eric right here, right? Oh,
well, I'll follow up on it.
I think LAFC. I don't know. I just don't know if the Supporter Shield is theirs to win. I think they're going to be focused on the U.S. Open Cup, which they should be. I mean, that's kind of a cakewalk if they take care of business against Seattle. But I just think the West Coast is more worried about itself than chasing the East. The West Coast is so weird because you get the Quakes just beating RSL. You get these random kind of spoilers out of nowhere in the West, where I don't think you get as much of that in the East, to be honest. And I think Miami just has everybody's number in the East when Messi's playing. And I think Messi's just going to come back and play against like the Crew and things like that. And it's going to be back to normal for Miami.
Yeah. I agree. I think the East is better on the top end and worse on the bottom end. And I think the West from top to bottom is way more evenly matched. Like we can see some, as he said, San Jose spoilers. We can see St. Louis and SKC pulling some upsets as well. And
right.
We have Minnesota on the outside looking in, and they're a good team when they get it together. So yeah, it's as far as us, LAFC, we're playing the Sound. I think the game against the Sounders tomorrow is gonna more decide our fate in the Open Cup than anything else. I think if we get past the Sounders, we're gonna have a second to breathe from last Sunday, and I think we'll be reorganized. But I think coming off like an emotional loss like that on Sunday on very short turnaround, and I'm still unclear whether the team flew directly to Seattle from Columbus. I hope that they did. Otherwise they're flying back here, and then it's another 3.5-hour flight up to Seattle, basically with 2 days of rest. So
there was no availability. So I think that kind of tells you that maybe they weren't back home.
Yeah. No, I think that's the right move. And I think also if the team kind of sticks together and they stay together as a group from that emotional loss, hopefully it'll help them regroup. But I think this game against Seattle or in Tacoma at the smaller stadium is really the game that's going to decide whether LAFC goes through to the Open Cup. I think on short rest, which to be fair, Seattle was just in Minnesota, but that was on Saturday and they're home now. So if we can get through this game, I'm not so worried about the last one. If we lose this one in Seattle, I think the blow to morale and the blow to confidence is going to be really big. we have a doubleheader following this in Houston, and Houston is a pretty good team. They're on the cusp. We play Saturday in LA, and I believe the next week we play in Houston, and I think that's going to be a tough 6 points to pick up. The 3 at home shouldn't be that bad, but the 3 on the road should be. We always have a hard time playing in Houston.
Well, I want to read a comment from, it looks like Football America. Do you think the LA Galaxy have a chance? So the Galaxy have played the most games in the league outside of Toronto and Sporting Kansas City, and they're at 52 points. So they're 4 points behind Inter Miami. They have played one more game than Inter Miami. I think it's going to be an uphill battle, but it's going to be interesting to see if LAFC can't catch Inter Miami. It's going to be a real battle between the Galaxy and LAFC for that number 1 spot in the Western Conference. And there is one more El Clasico match. I think it's in September, if I'm not mistaken. There's one more match. So that's going to decide the fate of LAFC's Supporter Shield hopes. It's going to decide their fate of being the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. And it'll be interesting to see. We're not going to focus too much on LAFC tonight, but if with Cherundolo's, obviously there's his seat's getting warmer and warmer. If he loses an El Clasico, that's just adding fire.
Wait, can we stop calling it a Clasico? Can we just keep its name El Tráfico?
El Tráfico.
I'm sorry. Did I call it a Clasico? Yeah. I'm sorry. I meant to call it my bad. That's my bad. El Tráfico. My bad.
A photographer texted me today. He was like, "Hey, can I get a credential for a Clasico?" I was like, "What? Barca and Real Madrid are playing?"
Yeah, that's my bad. That's insulting. I'm going to timeout for that. Honestly, I don't know why I called that. But El Tráfico, excuse me, El Tráfico. I feel like this is a must-win for Cherundolo. He's got to beat his rival. It's just going to be adding fuel to the fire of people wanting him out. And I think the tide's turning on that. I posted a video earlier today about Cherundolo, if it's his fault. And there was a lot of fans who are actually starting to trend that direction, Eric, thinking it is his fault. They're like, yeah, I think the writing's on the wall. I think you got to start putting a lot of this blame on Cherundolo. So we'll see what happens. I think it's going to be interesting. That's why this is going to be a interesting last couple weeks of MLS. There are 6 teams that I would consider to be legitimate MLS Cup contending teams. It's Inter Miami, it's FC Cincinnati, the Columbus Crew, LAFC, LA Galaxy, and RSL are my 6 teams I consider legitimate contenders for the Cup. I'm not saying that there can't be a team that's a spoiler and possibly upset one of these big teams, but that's the teams that I'm expecting one of those teams to win the MLS Cup in 2024. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. There's definitely going to be some upsets. That's what MLS, that's what they're known for, is all these upset teams. So it's going to be an interesting last couple of weeks, guys. It'll be curious to see what happens.
RSL is not a contender. I'm going to tell you that right now. Especially with Chicho Arango being injured now, I wouldn't be surprised if they dropped to a no home game, or if it was like a regular MLS playoff, it would be a no home game type of position for them. But I think they're going to drop actually maybe even lower than Portland if Chicho Arango is gone for a while.
How long is he out for though?
I don't know. He came off in the first half, so that's never a good sign. But we'll see. I haven't seen anything actually recently. Let me check.
I'm gonna look it up myself. Well, Chicho. So he's got a right hamstring injury. I mean, that's just something that can linger for maybe a couple of weeks. I think he'll be fine by the time the playoffs come around. Now, the one loss that they do have that could be significant could be Andres Gomez, who just recently got sold to a French team.
Yeah,
that could be something that could hurt them. But they did sign a couple players to replace him. I still think that they're I'm not saying that they're the top of that list, but I would say of all the teams in the West, they're the third. They have the third best chances of winning the Cup, and they've been a very good team this year. And Chicho Arango has, when he was healthy, was playing out of his mind. He scored 17 goals, which I think is a career high for him in MLS in a season. I think the most he had scored with LAFC was what was it, Eric? Maybe 17, 18 in that 2022 season.
Yeah, it was somewhere around there.
Yeah, something like that. So he was on pace to break his record that he had previously set at LAFC. So I think that they're a team you have to keep on. RSL, give them some love. I consider them the Western Conference version of the Columbus Crew, a team that a lot of people count out. They don't have the biggest names. They got those Colombian number 9s that everybody's always counting out, that balls out and scores.
So I just read about Chicho. It's going to be a couple of weeks no matter what. So he's going to be missing. Well, luckily they had an international break right now, but 2 games out of how many games? 9, right? 9 games. and then you have 7 games left. I don't know. Maybe they might drop out of their position and they drop into a spot where the playoffs aren't so favorable.
Hamstring injuries can be tough. I mean, I always think rule of thumb, like the worst best case scenario is a 6-week injury. And it's only because of how much running they do. If a hamstring doesn't get properly healed, and I've seen it a lot in NFL, I can think of a few players that like it's a common with wide receivers where they'll get a hamstring injury and they'll come back like 3 or 4 weeks into it before it's done, and they'll aggravate it, and then they'll be out again. So hamstrings are one of the most dangerous injuries to like try to come back early from. Sometimes it works, but if they don't, like it resets the clock to 0. I also looking at the Western schedule. I mean, you know, with the Galaxy, they have a pretty nice schedule going forward with not much congestion, but you know, Colorado has been surging on Salt Lake. I can see Colorado moving up. They ran pretty hot through the Leagues Cup, and they feel like they're really finding form. Austin is another team that's
I was gonna say Austin.
They've been surging the last probably 3-4 weeks, maybe even like the last 6 weeks, and so they seem to have found a winning stride again. And I could see them surging up the table as well.
And then Seattle too. Seattle's the team that, in the MLS play, normal MLS play, they surge at the end of the season every single year. So I could easily see Real Salt Lake dropping into a 6th or even 7th spot without Chicho Arango.
Yeah, the only thing about Seattle is that they can't stay healthy, and a lot of the players they rely on are just too up and down. They show spurts where they're really good, and they look like they could compete with the best of the best. But then there's other games where they completely embarrass themselves. They don't score goals, and they look like a team that is at the bottom half of the league. Yeah. And their big signing, Pedro de la Vega, has been not a disappointment because we haven't got to see him play. He just has been injured. It could have been a difference maker, and maybe that guy who replaced Nico Ladero, the legend at Seattle who helped them win their first MLS Cup. But he hasn't been healthy enough to really know what kind of a difference maker he is. And they're having to rely on a lot of the old heads and Morris and Rui Diaz and, you know, Rusnak. Well, Rusnak's not really an old head, but he's getting up there. He's like in his 30s now, but Christian Roldan. So Stefan Fry, I mean, is he even starting anymore? I think Thomas was starting in his place, but did Fry win his
Leagues Cup?
Fry came in for Leagues Cup and got absolutely shelled.
And US Open Cup, it's Thomas as well.
Thomas. Okay, yeah. So I knew that transition was happening, but it just feels like that the Sounders have kind of held on to certain players a little too long. You know, you ever heard of the old saying, it's better to get rid of a player a year too early than a year too late? Feels like the Sounders have kept on to players 3 years too late. You know, like they should have got rid of a lot of these guys. So I'm not really a believer in the Sounders. Now, one team a lot of people I saw mention were like they are believers in is the Rapids. And I think the Rapids are competitive. I just don't think that I think that they would they'd have to punch above their weight. I don't see them as being a team that's going to go on a run and beat the Galaxy and beat LAFC and just run the gauntlet, right? They seem like a team that could possibly, Favi, beat one good team, but it's just hard with the quality they have. I don't see them beating several good teams to make that run.
Yeah, so their striker, Navarro, excuse me if I'm saying this wrong.
Navarro. He's a Palmeiras guy too.
Yeah, Navarro. He had the highest expected goals in Leagues Cup, and he didn't have that many goals. So if he can find a way to get some of those in the back of the net, he becomes a superstar for them. They can get hot. I think they do have a solid squad. Armas at the helm. I think they can upset some teams. I mean, Stefan's on some crazy form right now, especially in the playoffs. If you go to a penalty shootout, I don't want to be facing the Colorado Rapids. That's for sure.
They also have a lot of really solid MLS veterans. You know, guys who've been playing in the league for 10 years. Like, I can't even think of too many other teams in the league that have more in their starting 11 than Colorado has now. And there's a lot to stay with that, with the stability that guys like that bring. You know, they're not the most glamorous, sexy guys, but I mean, you've seen it time and time again with the club. It's like you get that 10-year veteran in, and they really just put like a calmness to the team, and they make everybody play better.
Like Keegan Rosenberry is another one that's one that was not far.
I think it's good, especially from the national team standpoint, to see Stefan reemerge because he looked like he was going to be the heir apparent to Guzan a couple years ago. Then he makes the move to Man City. He goes on all these loan stints. It really doesn't pan out for him. He ends up back in MLS. He's only 29 years old, so he's obviously got some time. Goalkeepers obviously have the longevity of a goalkeeper is normally longer than a striker or any other position on the pitch. So I think he has a chance to really go into the second phase of his career and reestablish himself. And I think that if he plays as well as he has been, he might even be in contention to be the USMNT #1 again. I mean, there's obviously a hole there. So that will be interesting to see. Now, guys, let's talk about some of these teams that are on the fringe or fringe playoff teams, right? Some of these 8 to 9 seeds, which, I've said this numerous times. I hate that there is this many, that the playoffs is like kind of oversaturated. There's too many. It's watered down with all these extra teams. I wish it was a little bit more prestigious. That way it didn't feel like anybody and everybody just makes it. But Toronto and Atlanta, 2 teams that have really struggled in the Eastern Conference this year inconsistently. Toronto was a good team in the beginning of the year, and then they just completely nosedived, right? They lost like 4 or 5 in a row. And then Atlanta United went on a fire sale, selling all their players. Literally felt like all their good players were just, hey, you want them? They're up for sale. But here they are. They're in contention to make the playoffs. Out of those 2 teams, which one do you think is more likely and less likely to end up making it in the final spots?
Let me get this so I can head on out after this. But I think Toronto is in good hands if they avoid Miami or Columbus in the first round. I think if Toronto can find a way to play Cincy, the New York Red Bulls, or New York City, I think they have a second round entrance for the playoffs. And that's because when Insigne and Bernardeschi are playing for some sort of thing, when they are motivated, they can be a very good team. And then they have Prince Owusu as well, who can score goals, tall, kind of very lengthy strikers. So it's a problem for some back lines. But I think if they avoid Miami and if they avoid the Columbus Crew, I think they have a good chance of kind of being that dark horse that everyone wants always in the playoffs. And I truly think they have all the talent in the world to lift an MLS Cup. I just think they need to kind of hone it in. And when they play Miami, they just look defeated from the start. I mean, you saw it in Leagues Cup. You saw it right before Leagues Cup. When they played Miami, it just was a different team on the field. That's for sure.
Did you just say Toronto had a chance of winning an MLS Cup this year?
I think so. I really think they have all the talent in the world if they avoid Miami and Columbus.
Bobby, were you doing anything recreational before you hopped on the stream? Or
hey, it's California, baby.
Hey. That's a dark horse pick.
I mean, he's leaving with a banger, and he said, "Hey, man, I'm shooting for the stars." That question, I was even framing it like, do you even think they're going to make the playoffs? Because I could see, and we'll get Eric to jump in here in a second, but I see Philadelphia finding their way into the MLS playoffs because they have 2 games in hand, especially when it comes to Toronto. So if they end up winning the next 2 games, let's say, they'll jump Toronto for the 8th spot because of goal difference. They're at a +3 and Toronto's at a -12 goal difference, which is kind of crazy to think about. I actually think that Toronto and Atlanta might end up, I think one of them will make the playoffs, but the Union are going to take the other spot. And I think Toronto
will the Union take the other spot?
I think so. Yeah, I do think they will, because Atlanta United is just they folded it up. It's over. Like they're moving. They haven't even hired a coach. They're rolling with the interim guy.
Name a better wing back than Bernardeschi right now in MLS.
I think he's back to playing winger now.
Oh, okay. So we'll see, right? That team's such a question mark because he was playing a wing back for a long time.
No, he was. He was the best. He was the best DP wingback in the history of MLS. Right, $6 million salary. You better be. Eric, what do you think? Do you think that you think Toronto and Atlanta will?
All right, guys. I gotta get out of here.
All right, see you, buddy. Let me move this back to okay. So, do you think that Toronto and Atlanta will hold their spots, or do you think that the Union or another team will end up knocking them off?
Out of this lower table, I think Toronto is the most in jeopardy of dropping off the table. I think Atlanta, I just have a feeling with them, with their interim coach. I feel like they played a pretty good game against Galaxy, their last one, and that's, we didn't get too into it, but Marco Royce really took that game over, and if he takes it over, they're going to be a really frightening team. But leading up to that game, I felt like Atlanta had kind of stopped the bleeding, and even with their outgoing guys, had started to kind of like stabilize it a bit. So I can see Atlanta picking up some points here on the home stretch. And I think Philadelphia definitely is going to pick up points in the home stretch. Toronto just – I can never really tell which Toronto is going to show up. And they have it in them to compete with any team, but they also have it in them to bottle it up against any team. So it's hard to hitch a wagon on that horse.
Well, here's another crazy thing, and let me add our names up here. I when I record my solo episodes, I normally take them off. Let me just add this on there so people can see who we are. So here's the crazy thing too, Eric. Look at this at the bottom. I don't know if you can see this. I know it might be a little small, but look here at the bottom. 26, 26, 26, 26. The bottom 4 teams all have 26 points. 10 and 11 have 27. 9th spot has 28. So there's so many teams in that range. You're just right there at the cusp of making the playoffs. With that, they're just within 2 points, right, of getting that final spot. And even the Revs, I mean, they've got 2 games in hand, and they're at that 26 points. Now the Revs were, their start was catastrophic, right? They were terrible in the beginning of the season, but they've made a lot of additions and signings where they're starting to compete down the stretch. We'll see if it makes any impact. But this is definitely going to be a tight race down the stretch for that final spot in the Eastern Conference. And especially with 8 games, it could really go either way.
Yeah, preface this that I'm much more familiar with the West than I am with the East, but all 4 of those teams at the bottom, they just don't. I just don't see a lot of threat out of any of them. I feel like Nashville kind of need to blow that team up and start over. Chicago has kind of just been a mess, like for as long as I can remember. DC, same thing. And New England, maybe they're the one team that can kind of get out of there, but and then Charlotte as well. Charlotte had a lot of swing and misses this transfer window. It seemed like they really wanted to try to make something happen, but I don't think they really did make much happen. So they're another one. My feeling is that the bottom of this table at the end of the season is still going to be the same bottom of the table, and I think. There's a handful of teams that are outside looking in that have a chance to move up, but I think most of them are going to stay out. And not to mention, the top half of the East is really tough. So these teams have some pretty tough games ahead of them as well.
So I wanted to bring this up too. This is one of the points I want to make on the show, that just to compare and contrast, right? This is the 2022 MLS standings, right? Regular season standings. So there used to be 7 teams per conference that made the playoffs, and they would do the single elimination games, right? And then the 1 seed obviously got a bye in the first round, which I liked. I thought that rewarded the best team in the league. That's gone now. Now the first, technically the 8th and 9th seed they have to play the extra game. Everybody else plays the same amount of games. Now look at this, Eric. This is interesting. The seventh seed in the 2022 MLS Cup or MLS season standings had 48 points. Orlando City had 48 points. Columbus Crew missed the playoffs with 46 points. And the Western Conference RSL was the 7th seed with 47 points, and then Portland had 46 points. Okay, now let's go to the 2023 because it's a full season, and let's look at the point system that as far as that goes. So Charlotte made the playoffs with 43 points. Okay, not too bad. That's kind of close. It's not like drastically different from what Orlando City had the year before. Like, you don't have a 30-point team making the playoffs, right? It's pretty close. In the Western Conference, San Jose had 44 points making the playoffs. Pretty similar, right? Yep. Well, so let's go to 2024, and you just look at the trajectory of, only 28 points right now making the playoffs with 8 games left. It looks like there's going to be for the first time ever that there's going to be possibly an MLS team making the playoffs with 30 points. 30 points. It looks like that's going to happen for the first time ever. A team making the playoffs with 30 points. That is just, that's embarrassing, honestly. That just shows that how watered down this thing is to have a team that will probably end up with 30 points making the playoffs.
Yeah, no, I agree. The playoffs is a little bit too much. And we haven't even talked about the opening round of the 3 games, which
that's the 3.
Yeah. I'm not gonna say what I really think about it on the show, because I already dropped 1 curse word. But it's, on the one hand, playoffs are really exciting.
It's the Arteta. If I say what I think, I'll be suspended for 6 months.
Yeah. If I say what I think, Will's not having me on his show for 6 months. But yeah, it's really watered down. I mean, they're fun. I can't say that I really hate the expanded format. I really only hate the first round of best of 3. I do think that as far as the league, because this inevitably says, well, what's the point of the league then if 64% of the teams make the postseason, and the seeding still does matter, and especially when you start getting towards the end and the semifinals and the finals, where being that home team is a huge advantage. So I do think with the league, like, the seeding is really important. But yeah, otherwise, the last show we did, the fella on there, he was saying, like, he tunes in for the playoff soccer, like the league stuff. He doesn't really get into it, but like with most sports in the playoffs, everybody kicks it up a notch and you start getting really exciting games. So if they're going to give us a little more of that energy, like, I can't hate it too much. So
no, 100%. And real quick, guys, if you're in the show, please make sure you share with a friend. We're trying to grow the audience as much as we can. I say I'll probably go at least another 30 minutes. And also make sure you like this video down below. It helps with the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that little bell notification so you never miss any of my videos. Yeah. So Eric, let's talk real quick before I know you have to go here in a second. Let's talk a little bit about the Golden Boot race. Okay. Just a little fun, right? I'll get back more to the standings in a minute. So Denny Bouanga is in 3rd place technically, because Chicho and Christian Benteke is tied for 1st place for the Golden Boot race. Do you see with Giroud, obviously he's going to have some opportunities and probably score some goals in the final stretch of the season. At least that's the goal, right? If he doesn't, there's a big issue. Do you think that Denny will be able to win the Golden Boot for the 2nd year in a row? Or do you think that he'll probably end up losing probably closely this year?
Man, I don't even know how to answer this question. And some of it, I think, right, if you look at any attacking group and how they gel together, Giroud is just a much different player than has been in the 9 position with Bouanga. It's been Bogusz, who he's naturally a bit more of a 10 and he'd play a false 9. Or you have Kai Kamara, who's more like a target 9, but does a lot of the high pressing, a lot of the dirty work. Meanwhile, Giroud, he seems to be most effective playing with his back to the goal, and he's an excellent distributor of the ball, or he's in on the set pieces. So I think Giroud's not really going to take too many goals off of Denny's plate. But the question for me is, does Giroud fit into the system in a way that Denny can keep scoring the same goals he has been, which typically come on transitions and fast breaks? That's how Denny gets his goals. So does Giroud slow down the front 3 enough that we start losing these transition breaks? And does our pressing diminish enough that we stop forcing these turnovers midfield to create these breaks? So for him to get the Golden Boot, that's my big question, is how does this front 3 gel, and can he stay productive with that being the case? And if he feasts, the whole team's going to feast. And if he struggles, the whole team's going to struggle. Like, LAFC has been Bouanga FC at times. Chicho Arango, the injury really throws a lot of it into doubt, I think. So we'll see on that. It's fully capable, but it really just depends how long he's back from a hamstring injury and how serious that injury is.
Yeah, I would say that he probably won't. I don't think Denny's going to win it. I think he's going to come up short, honestly, just because of opportunities. And I mean, look at Matty. He's got 13 goals this year. So he's obviously had a lot of chances. And I think there's just too many mouths to feed for what they have. So I think that he'll probably come up short. It's going to be an interesting race. And to see what happens, my prediction is I think Luis Suarez is going to end up winning the Golden Boot. I think now that he's back, I think he's going to have a strong finish to the season. And when you step out, or when you eventually leave, I'm going to move on to the MVP award. I'm going to give my prediction on that, because that kind of ties into it, because that's going to be a hot topic to see who they think is going to win the MVP. It's kind of a tight race right now. It could really go either way. I was going to say Messi would probably win it, but he's obviously been out for so long. I mean, he's only played 12 out of 26 games this year, 12 goals, 13 assists, really good contribution, just hasn't played enough to make a difference, at least from an award standpoint. Now, if they gave him the MVP award with his, missing half the season, I think a lot of people will definitely start feeling, talking about the rigged narrative, right? That the whole thing is rigged.
Yeah, would you be surprised though?
It just depends if he comes back. It depends if he comes back, before the season and he plays a couple games. Now, if he plays like at least 20 games, oh man, I don't think there's any chance. I think that would be really bad for the league to have a guy miss half the year and win the MVP.
I think Suarez to take the Golden Boot is a pretty good pick. If we were in Vegas and that was up there with a decent line, like I think that's smart money. I also think that if Suarez does win the Golden Boot, he should pretty much be a lock for MVP because with Messi gone, he's really carried a lot of the production on that team. I mean, that's been a good team effort, but if he gets the Golden Boot, they're finishing first in the Supporter Shield race. And, typically winning the Supporter Shield more often than not is going to be where the MVP is found.
100%. Yeah, man. It's gonna be interesting to see how it plays out and who ends up winning it. Eric, hey, listen, man, I appreciate you for hopping on. Always do. Make sure you give Eric a follow. His what is your exact channel? Isn't it Eric_VOBG on Twitter?
It is. Yeah, and you can also find me at the Voices of Black and Gold podcast, which is at Voices of Black and Gold.
Best LAFC podcast there is. Make sure you guys subscribe and give them a listen.
Hey, thank you.
I appreciate it, Eric. Have a good night, man. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Will. Have a good one.
You too. So that was a good friend of mine, Eric. We were talking about the MVP race. I'd like to get you guys involved. Who do you think is in the lead right now for the MVP in MLS? Like, who do you think is in the driver's seat? It's kind of a interesting year because so many of the good players have missed a lot of games with international duty, with injury. There's been a lot of missed time by some of these players that would have probably been in the driver's seat to win this award. I would say that I agree. I think Luis Suarez has to probably be the favorite to win it. And by the way, these statistics are just completely off. Luis Suarez is 5'9", 159 pounds. I don't think so. There's no way. I think he's like 6'1" or 6'2", and he's like 210 pounds. I don't know who the hell updated this, but hey, whatever. I think Luis Suarez has to be the leader for the MVP. I'd say. Love to know what you guys think about that. He's got 14 goals, 5 assists. He's played 19. He's only started 15. He's going to play in 8 more games. He's only 3 goals behind the Golden Boot race lead. Chicho Arango is obviously injured right now. So that helps him out. Christian Benteke is an interesting one. I think he probably is the second person in contention for the Golden Boot, but Christian Benteke is unfortunately doesn't have the service that Luis Suarez does. So it's a little more difficult for, I think it's going to be more difficult for him to hold on or onto this tie for the lead. It'll be an interesting race to see. Let's see. Adam says, could LA Galaxy get to the Western Conference Final? I think they could. I think this team is very, very capable of winning making a run. Their defense concerns me. Jalen Neal is obviously a very talented center back. It'll be interesting to see how he plays down the stretch. Yoshida is 36, so he concerns me. Mickey Yamane and Audi are good fullbacks, but just a little inconsistent. Marco Royce looked really good the other night against Atlanta United. I think he'll be the X factor for the LA Galaxy. It just depends if he's going to start. Is he going to come off the bench and be a super sub? I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty with that so far. But yes, I believe the LA Galaxy are very much there's a very good chance that they could make it to the Western Conference Final. I think they might even be able to make it to the MLS Cup, but we'll have to see. I want to see a little bit more. I need a bigger sample size than one match with Marco Royce to really see how that plays out. IC says, will the Revs get their stadium, and do you think Chicago could get one in the future? I think that the Revs will finally get their stadium. I don't know when it's going to be built. I haven't really, let's see, haven't really followed up too closely of when they're expecting to have that built. Um, let's see. I think that they will get it done. I don't know when though. So the Revs fans should be happy that they'll actually have a stadium closer to Boston than driving out to Foxborough and having to watch the games at Gillette Stadium. So yeah, I do think that it is going to happen. And as far as Chicago, I have Chicago has just got its own issues. It's got a lot. It's got a lot of them, honestly. I don't really know what's going on with Chicago. They're about to make a coaching change. You guys have seen me hint at that on Twitter or X. I'm just so used to calling it Twitter. But I made a hint on that on X. We'll see what happens with them. It's going to be, I think that we're probably at least a decade away from really getting into discussions about Chicago having their own soccer specific stadium. I think that they're going to be at Soldier Field for a while. It's Wonga's Golden Boot. I don't know. I think there's just too many mouths to feed, honestly. Mr. Mister says, I'll tell you is I saw Giroud at Arsenal. Although he can get the odd goal, his biggest strength is hold up play and distributing the ball. If him and Bouanga get an understanding, they will be lethal. Yeah, Giroud is kind of like, he's great at hold up play. He's more like of a playmaker striker, right? He's very selfless. He's not going to just, Cristiano Ronaldo it where he's taking every shot he possibly can. He's willing to make the extra pass. That's one thing I like a lot about his game, and I think that makes him one of these players that can play for a long time because of his style. So maybe he is a very selfless player for LAFC, but if you notice in the game against Columbus, Bouanga was really trying to feed him to get him his goal. So I think that I still think there's just too many mouths to feed. I do think Bouanga will benefit from him, but I don't know if Bouanga will be able to hold on to or win the Golden Boot race this year. I wouldn't rule out Cucho for MVP in the end if he can keep his League's Cup form. Yeah, the only thing with Cucho though is he's got 13 goals and 8 assists, which is good, but they would have to win the Eastern Conference, and he would have to have great stats. I think that's what really helps Luis Suarez is that normally the player with the best, just crazy statistics, or their team's number one in the league wins the Supporter Shield, wins MVP. If you notice in 2023, Lucho Costa won MVP. He didn't have the most goals. He had 3 less goals than Denis Bouanga, but he had 14 assists. So he had 31 goal contributions, and his team was he was playing on the best team in the league last year. So that's why he won the MVP in 2023. So I think that it's probably going to be an Inter Miami player, and if not Inter Miami player, it will be whoever finishes first in the Western Conference, their best player will win MVP. Chicago is not making a coaching change. Are you asking me if they are, or are you saying that they're not? Frank Klopas is their coach. Yeah, I know, but he's gone. He's not going to last. They're going to hire someone else. His days are numbered. They're very close to hiring another manager. I don't think he'll make it. I mean, they've been talking with Greg Berhalter, but I think Greg Berhalter is going to be the next manager of the Chicago Fire, which is crazy to think that he's getting another job. I think he's terrible, but hey, here we are. He's looking like he is going to be the next manager of the Chicago Fire. Yeah, did you see today that the LA Galaxy? Now this is crazy too. The LA Galaxy traded, not rumors. They traded away the discovery rights for this player today. The guy that played for Houston. Let me see. Or who is it? Who is it that they traded him for? Oh, Cincinnati. That's who it was. Cincinnati. So they traded So the LA Galaxy acquired a first-round pick in 2025 and conditional $50K in general allocation money from Cincinnati to have the rights to this guy. His name is his name not on here? Oh, teenage Hadebi, I think is his name. He played for Houston in 2021 to 2023. The craziest part is that this man has played in Major League Soccer. Okay, he played Major League Soccer for 3 years. He has never played for the LA Galaxy. He was sold. I want to say that he went to the Turkish league or maybe a Saudi league team. Nonetheless, he left the league. He left MLS. We'll look it up. And he has never played for the LA Galaxy. Yet they have his discovery rights. That just blows my mind that a team that he never played for has his discovery rights, and he's been in MLS. It's not like the typical like, hey, this guy, they have his discovery rights. If he comes to MLS, they get to sign him. This guy did play in MLS. He played 51 games for Houston Dynamo from 2021 to 2023, and the Cincinnati had to get his discovery rights because they got rid of the allocation order, which used to be a thing for domestic players or USMNT international or USMNT players, and it used to be for players that were sold from MLS to another league. You had to use that you had to have the first pick or the team or right of refusal to be able to sign a player that met that criteria. But this discovery rights listing is just so. Do you really think the Galaxy were going to sign this guy? It just blows my mind that we're still doing these clown rules that nobody understands and makes no sense. But nonetheless, Cincinnati had to trade $50K and a first round pick in the 2025 MLS Super Draft in order to sign him because they needed some center back depth pretty desperate, or they were desperate for some center back depth. So that's just crazy. I just can't believe these rules are still like this. But I expect Cincinnati to make a serious run for the playoffs. I think once Lucho Acosta gets settled back in from injury, like once he starts getting back in form, I think that they will be a contender again. Now, people say that they don't have a striker, but I thought Kevin Kelsey was really good when he played. I think he had like 6 goals or 5 goals in his appearances. I mean, Lucho Acosta has more assists this year than he did last year. He's got 11 goals, 18 assists. He's having a great season. If he can get back to his form, I think that they will be fine. That they will be a serious contender for the MLS Cup. Let's see what Kelsey has. Kevin Kelsey. I'm just curious what his actual statistics are, the Venezuelan striker. Let's see what he actually did. 6'4", just crazy size, really good. So 5 goals. So he's played 16. He started with 11. He has 5 goals. He's slowed down a little bit, but I still think he's got potential. He's only, what is he? He's 20 years old. I mean, he's got all the potential in the world. He could still be very good. I mean, he's kind of hit like a little bit of a wall, but that happens. It can easily just go right back to him, banging in goals. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I think that they'll be fine. I think that they're going to be a serious contender I think they are a team that you would consider to be an MLS Cup contending squad. Michael Pelly says, I would rather have had the top 3 teams get the bye and the next 6 play the play-in round with expanding 9 teams. Yeah, but I don't even like that. I mean, I miss the old format when it was just the 7 teams. Let's go to 2022. That was the last year. So 7 teams made the playoffs, half of each conference, which is still a lot, but I would rather have that than 18 of 29 teams making it. So 7 of 14 teams make it, okay? And then the first seed team in each conference gets a bye. That was perfect for me. That rewards each team in each conference with a some rest for making it. So they would obviously have the first round bye. It was a single elimination game, which I like too. Rewards the higher seed with the home match advantage. And if people didn't like that, I mean, back in 2019 or 2018, there used to be the 2 legs. Let me make sure. Let's cut playoffs. I'm okay with a 2-leg format as well. Once you start getting into like the further down the stretch in the game, if you want your team to play in the playoffs, it's just that. Wow, it wasn't even 2019 either. They still had the single elimination then too. When was that? Was it 2018 the last year? Let's see. Okay, yeah. So the first round was a single elimination. So yeah, I like that format pretty well. That way it gave the other once you start for advancing in the playoffs, it gave each team the opportunity to play at home So that was okay. I mean, if they have to have that format, that's fine with me. But just the best of three just doesn't make any sense in MLS. It makes no sense at all. No other, no soccer league does that in the world. I mean, no soccer league really has a playoff format like us in general, but nobody really has a playoff format like this. Best of three makes no sense. Let's see. And here's the crazy part. Look at this. So last year, I'm starting to remember this a little bit now. So last year, the only series that went to game 3 was RSL and Houston. That was the only game that went to 3. Actually, that's not true. Let's see. Actually, there's 2. So Seattle and Dallas did. I guess there's a couple. Never mind. There was 3. So 3 of the 8. My bad. So 3 of the 8. So the Seattle Sounders, the Dallas game or series went 3. The Houston RSL series went 3, and then the Columbus Atlanta series went to 3. Just too many games. Just way too many games. Way too many games. Instead of a coach, what they need are currently working on is finding a sporting director since Greg has stepped down due to personal. Oh, George. Yes, George. Yeah, but here's the thing. Greg is going to be the sporting director too. They're going to have someone in place for him, but Greg's going to be calling all the shots. This director is going to be doing all the grunt work. Greg is going to make all the final decisions, but they need somebody who can do all the heavy lifting for him, and then he has to sign off on all the moves they make. I would be absolutely shocked if Greg Berhalter was not the manager, the next manager of the Chicago Fire. I'd be absolutely shocked if he wasn't. Soccer production says stick to the current playoffs. We get a feel of both atmospheres and more teams make it. Yeah, but the thing is the playoffs are supposed to be prestigious. There needs to be a balance of how many teams. I think that 7 is fine. I'm okay with that. In an ideal world, I would have 5 teams make the playoffs, each conference. So 7's fine with me. I just don't like the best of 3. I don't really like the play-in game that much. Does the best of 3 makes no sense. Why can't you just go back to the 2 legs? That way each team does get that. Yeah, but there's 9 though. There's a play-in game. There's 9 teams make the playoffs. So you've added 4 more teams in total. And the best team in the league doesn't get the best team in each conference doesn't get a bye anymore. So you could do, I mean, it's still 9 is just a play-in spot. Yeah, but it's technically still the playoff. It's still a playoff spot. Like you're still made the playoffs. Is Columbus a top 2 contender for the cup? 100%. Yeah, 100%. I would say that Columbus is probably the favorite to win the MLS Cup right now, I would say, because Wilfred Nancy's the GOAT of MLS coaches. He's the GOAT. I mean, his record is insane. I was always wondering what he would do if he got a team that could at least just give him more than what Montreal has given him. And he was able to win an MLS Cup in his first year with a brand new team. So, yeah, I think that they definitely are in contention. And hell, they would have won the Champions Cup too if it weren't for Diarrhea Gate, right? If they hadn't gotten sick in Mexico. So, yeah, I think that I do think that the Crew are they're probably the favorite right now. I mean, you see how good they're playing right now. Cucho Hernandez is playing out of his mind. They got 3 games in hand, so they could. I think that they will probably end up being the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference, and then we'll see them face Miami probably in the Eastern Conference Final, which would be great content at least, right? It'll be interesting to see if they can stay healthy. It'll be interesting to see what their path is. But yes, I would say that Columbus is probably the hottest team right now that there is. That's why the best team gets 2 home games instead of in the first round if it's forced to 3. Yeah, but would you rather have 2 games or would you have a bye? In the old format, you got a bye the first week, and then you also got a one home game, and it was single elimination. Like, that was way better for them. If Crew wins CONCACAF Champions Cup next year, are they one of the best all-time MLS teams? And is Nancy coached? And Nancy is coached too. Here's the thing, though. Good question, Michael. By the way, if the Crew win the MLS Cup this year, I think that there is less than a 10% chance that Nancy's even back. I think he's going to Europe. If they win MLS Cup again this year, I think he's gone. I think he'll go to. I think he's going to go to Europe. I think he's going to get a call and a chance to coach over there because of how good he is over here. This league's too easy for him. He would have won MLS Cup back to back in 2023 and 2024. He won the League's Cup, which, we can argue about the prestigiousness of that tournament. We won't get into that. But he was the runner-up in the CONCACAF Champions Cup 2024 final. So he is he's a really good coach. He's the best coach, I think, in MLS history. I mean, look at what he had to do. He had to beat where am I missing them at? Columbus. Okay, so they advanced. So they beat Houston, nothing crazy. Then they beat Tigres, and then they beat Monterrey, and then they obviously lost to Pachuca in the final, but they had a pretty tough schedule to get to the final. Really, they're a very good team, one of the best teams I've seen. I wouldn't say they're the most talented, but they're the best balance of well coached and talent there is in MLS. I feel like the New York Red Bulls will give Miami a hard game, especially if Forsberg is back. Yeah, the only thing is with the Red Bulls is I don't think they added enough in the I thought they were going to do more this summer than what they did, so they might be a little bit of a thorn. Maybe Forsberg, Lewis Morgan finds his form again, possibly. I just don't think that they're good enough to really knock off a giant at this moment. I think that they're going to be competitive, but I think they've really slowed down since the hot start they had at the beginning of the year. I'm going to go 5 more minutes. So if you guys have any final questions, I got 5 more minutes. Ask away. Then we're going to end the stream. It was a very good stream tonight. Soccer Production says, is the only realistic chance of being a top 5 league if we win the Club World Cup before 2026? No, there's no chance we're going to be a top 5 league by 2026. That ship has sailed. Not going to happen. Ship has sailed. Easily see Nancy managing in a top 4 league. I wouldn't. Now, this might be a little bit of a hot take, but I could see him coaching the Premier League. I don't think he has any interest in coaching in France or Germany. I think he has his eyes on the Premier League, and he doesn't really have. There's not really any urgency to leave. Like, he can stay in Columbus as long as he wants. If he wins like this, he doesn't have to take any job. He could be perfectly content with just building his career in Columbus and not really worrying about anything else. I mean, he is 47, so he's not necessarily young. He's not necessarily old. He's kind of like in the middle. And he could just be content with living in Columbus and just winning championships, so he can be picky. He can be selective about what he wants to do next. Maybe that's what he'll do. Which team could upset a big team in the playoffs? So my Eastern Conference team that I think could upset a big team would be I think Orlando City is a team that's very inconsistent, but if they have the talent to be competitive. I think that if Orlando City played a Cincinnati in the second round, or maybe even a Miami in the second round somehow, I think they could be a spoiler in that sense. Orlando City in the East or in the Western Conference, I think Colorado is technically the 4th place team, right? But I mean, they could easily slip down to like 6, 7, or 8. I think Colorado is. They're not going to win an MLS Cup, but they can punch above their weight and they could get an upset win. If that's what I think that they could do. It'll be interesting to see if especially if Stefan plays well, Be interesting to see how they do perform in the playoffs. They obviously had a good Leagues Cup run, but that's not really the test that I value. I want to see what they do in the rest of this regular season and see what they do in the MLS Cup playoffs. Even if we win the Club World Cup with the Premier League and La Liga teams that's competing in it, yeah, I mean, how would that make us a top? I don't understand how that would make us a top 4 or top 5 league by 2026 if we win it, though. I mean, that would be nice, but that doesn't really prove anything. Like the body of work, it doesn't really prove anything. Charlotte is so good defensively. Yeah, Charlotte's a very good, very ambitious team, especially for the market size. They're not in LA and New York City and Miami. They're more like in that Columbus range, but they're willing to spend, which you love to see. So if Charlotte comes up short this year, I think next year they're going to be a real contender and they're going to be like in that Columbus range. So it'll be interesting to see how things play out and what happens. And this should be an interesting playoffs. I hope you guys like this first stream. I'm going to try to do this every week just to kind of update the standings, talk about the Golden Boot race and any questions you guys have. Appreciate you guys tuning in as always. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, hit that little bell notification so you never miss a video. And until next time, guys, I will see you all soon.